effectively that 2 weeks later they are still coming and they're not getting bored of the whole situation. So it's really a race of messages going on here, and it's a matter of figuring out who will win in the end.
And we've also seen some political developments in the last 24 hours or so, Hoda, with some opposition parties holding talks with the government. How do the protesters in Tahrir Square feel about traditional powers like the Muslim Brotherhood or Al-Wafd negotiating with the government on their behalf? Are they okay with that idea?
Well, they say that no one is negotiating on their behalf, and they do understand that they have to form their own committee or find the representatives which will join these negotiations on their behalf. They make it clear all along that they were a group of young people who felt disenfranchised, who felt they did not have a future, they did not have a prospect of a fair life here in Egypt, and they're not going to join any political party. They certainly do want their voice to be heard. They certainly don't want to be pushed aside by other political groups, as you mentioned, the Muslim Brotherhood, and they're very much aware that they have to come to some sort of representation. And that has been a bit complicated for them. The organizers have been pondering on that issue for the past few days now, but they still haven't come up with a unified solution. The demands are unified, the representation is not unified so far.
So, of course, the other question being is, where is this going next? I mean, we've seen 2 weeks of protests now, and Tahrir Square doesn't seem to be emptying anytime soon, and the president doesn't seem to be wanting to stand down anytime soon. How long is this situation going to last?
I guess that's the $1 million question, and that's the one question no one is able to answer. If you look at the picture now at the moment, you would say that there's some sort of political stalemate. The government has said what it's willing to do. It has not changed. It has not taken any concrete action, which gives the confidence to the people on the square here that it's actually serious. The people on the square here say, we're not backing off. We've gone so far that we're certainly not backing off at the moment. And there's nothing that is at the moment enticing them to, let's say, wrap it up and leave Liberation Square. They say that they will continue occupying the square until there's some concrete step. And I think there's going to be divisions at that stage. If President Mubarak does do some concrete steps, like does sign, some presidential decrees, then the conversation will be between the different opinions here. Well, should we have him stay until he ends his term, or no, should he leave again? So there's a little bit of confusion around that, and it's very difficult to find a unified voice on that.
Thank you very much, Hoda Hamid, joining us live from Cairo, overlooking Tahrir Square, where again thousands have gathered this Monday in day 14 of anti-government protests. The protesters there staying put, saying they won't leave until Hosni Mubarak stands down. Well, let's now speak to Mona Amin, the deputy editor of Al Aram Weekly. This is the magazine for which an Egyptian journalist worked for, a journalist who was killed in this unrest. There was a symbolic funeral held for him earlier today in Tahrir Square. Mona, thank you very much for speaking to us. I don't know whether or not you were in Tahrir today for this symbolic funeral, but tell us how it was. How was the atmosphere being there today?
Well, the atmosphere is very charged. We as Egyptian journalists came in force at the Union of the Egyptian Journalists to take our colleagues to have a symbolic funeral. We walked through the streets of Cairo from our union to Tahrir Square, and we had there the Islamic prayer in absentia for him, and he was buried earlier, of course, but at least we had a symbolic coffin for him and for the 300 or more people who were killed, and it was very moving. His widow, who is also a colleague journalist at the state-owned Al Akhbar, was there. There was half the members of the executive council of the Union of Journalists, and we are now calling for an extraordinary meeting of the union to see how we can support our daughters and sons and our people in the Medan as a union.
Mona, do you have any more information on the circumstances in which Ahmed Mahmoud was killed?
Yes, of course. Hamid Mahmoud was actually, he lived somewhere near the Ministry of Interior, and on that day, where the Minister of Interior, the Habib Al-Adli, was just fleeing, and the officers were fleeing the headquarters of the Ministry of Interior, he just happened to be standing in his balcony, and he was taking pictures, and a sniper from the roof of the Ministry of Interior just, aimed a bullet in his head. He spent 4 days at the University College Hospital in Asr al-Aini, and he was in coma, and then he died.
Oh, well, certainly a very sad story. Tell us about the conditions under which you're working, journalists in Egypt are working, because we've seen foreign journalists being harassed in the last 2 weeks or so. How has it been for you?
Yes, we have been calling. Each of us in his own place have been trying and very hardly to protect foreign journalists. The last 48 hours were just we had a glimpse of fascism, where thugs were let loose on the streets of downtown Cairo, and I happen to live in downtown Cairo, so I see them going and coming, and they were any foreigner walking in the street, let alone journalists with camera or with anything. They were arresting them as spies and handing them to the military police, which is patrolling this area, which is an army, of course, the military police. And I spent the past 48 hours trying to tell our in the union, our editors, and running around my house, getting my press card of Al-Ahram.
Okay.
I'm a senior person with a gray hair, so maybe, I wasn't, like people would listen to me, and I spent it screaming, what is this hysteria, why are we doing this to the foreigners? Those are people doing their work, and even ordinary tourists were targeted and attacked as being spies, and this, I have absolutely no doubt that this is a kind of hysteria by the thugs and state security police. And now they say there is even evidence that some of the very top leaders of the NDP had given a green light for this. But it's becoming better. It's becoming better.
Okay, well, we hope it stays better, because it's certainly been very difficult for journalists to work. Thank you very much, Mona Amin of Al-Ahram Weekly, joining us there on the line from Cairo. Other world headlines now, and WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange is appearing in a UK court again on Monday. A judge is expected to rule on whether he should be extradited to Sweden. Assange has not been charged with anything, but Swedish authorities want to question him over sex allegations. His defense team planned to argue the Swedish prosecutor doesn't have the right to issue an European arrest warrant. They're also concerned the trial will be held in secret with no chance of open justice. They also claim an abuse of proceedings because Assange has repeatedly offered himself for questioning, but he was turned down. The lawyers also argue Assange is a victim of illegal and corrupt behavior by the Swedish prosecutors, and that any extradition could lead to his deportation to the United States, where he could face the death penalty. While Al Jazeera's Lawrence Lee is at the court in London, where the prosecution has been outlining its case.
Well, they've said basically, for a start, that he did force himself on these women, that violence was used. And as well as that, they're trying to undermine the idea that he's only going to Sweden really in some way at the US's behest, with a view to try to get him extradited to somewhere like Guantanamo for far graver charges to do with spying and things like that. They're saying that it doesn't necessarily follow that Sweden would do that, but clearly those concerns are still there. Assange himself has said that he would be perfectly happy, and his defence said he would have been happy either to go to the Swedish embassy in London or indeed to Scotland Yard, the home of the London police, to be questioned via video link, and those options weren't held open to him. So there is still this seeping doubt as to why the Swedish prosecutors are so keen to get him over there, even though they haven't actually charged him yet with any offence. They only want him for questioning, and so there's this underlying suspicion that there's something greater and darker at play here.
Sudan's President Omar al-Bashir has formally accepted that the South will break away with the results of a referendum due in the coming hours. Preliminary results show nearly 99% voted in favor of secession. The poll was part of a 2005 North-South peace deal, which ended decades of civil war. Al Jazeera's Haru Mutasa joins us now live from the southern Sudanese capital, Juba. Haru, I imagine the mood very much celebratory where you are.
Yes, it is. But we've been told by officials here that because there's been a side-setting plan, people have been told not to gather in one particular place. Originally,